4.5 day 2, we're going to write equations and then also solve some word problems. So for the first examples, these are just to help with the homework for number 69 through 72. We're supposed to find A, B, and C for the given function. So for example 1, that one should be a fast one. And notice number 2 is that we are looking only at sine and so not at cosine. So we have to do shifts if it doesn't look like a sine graph. So since we have to identify A, B, and C, remember A is the amplitude, B is the period, and C is how it is shifted. So we notice in this first graph, this is 1 full period. So we notice the period is 2 pi. And then the amplitude, we notice that it goes down to 2. So amplitude is 2. And then it's reflected. So that tells me that my A value is going to be -2. Then it's not shifted right or left any. And so we can see that this is all that we have to write on the graph. So this is A is -2, B is 1. So if we remember that period for a sine and cosine function is 2 pi over b. Since it's not shifted left or right any, what we do is we set the period, we set 2 pi equal to 2 pi over b, and then we could tell that b is just 1 just by looking at it. Okay, and then that's all we have to identify. C is 0. It's not shifted left or right any, so we are done with this example. So the next example, we have a graph here. And so I want you to go ahead and try it. This one was a little more challenging. So remember, we're looking at sine. We need to identify A, B, and C. Now to help you out just a little bit more, so I did note that the period is 2 pi b. What you need to remember is that a phase shift equals -c over b. So in this example, in the first example, example 1, we know that our period is 2 pi. So period is 2 pi, so that's what I said it equal to. 2 pi equals 2 pi over b. Now, if you're looking at this example here, it is shifted. And so whatever it's shifted, you're going to set that on this side and then make it equal to -c over b. And then you should know what b is, of course, before you start to figure out what c is. Okay, so trying this out together, I notice that my amplitude is going to be 1/2. So I know that because it's 0, and then it goes to -1/2, and then to, that should be +1/2. And what else do we know? We know the period. So whether or not I'm looking at sine or cosine, I notice that this is 1 full cycle. So I know that's from 0 to 2. So I know that my period equals 2. Now I'm going to have to shift it left or right because that is not a sine graph, but I just wanted to look at what my period is. So period is 2. So knowing that, then what I do is I set that equal to 2 pi over b. So 2 equals 2 pi over b, and then I will solve for b. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and multiply b to both sides. So I get 2b equals 2 pi. Now to solve for b, I'm going to divide by 2. So I notice that b equals just pi. b is pi. Then I notice that it's shifted over. So in order to get a sine graph, just remember what sine looks like. It starts at the midline and then makes 1 full cycle right here. So we notice that it shifted this direction, and it kind of tells us right here that is 1/2. Okay, so if you think about it, period is 2, 1/2 of 2 is 1, 1/2 of 1 is 1/2. Okay, so I know that this point here is 1/2, so I know it shifts right 1/2. So we're going to take a look at the phase shift. Phase shift is -c over b. So I'm going to say 1/2 equals -c over b. Then we do know what b is. b is pi. So let's set it equal. 1/2 equals -c over pi. Let's multiply by -pi. So we notice that c equals -pi over 2. Now that's actually what you would plug in to the equation here. So just so you see what this looks like, we don't have to do that. We're just identifying A, B, and C for the homework. But A is 1/2, and then this is sine. B is pi, and then x, and then minus pi over 2. So I just want to show you that because it says negative, so that's what you're actually plugging in there. Now for the homework, it's just asking what c is. So you actually put in c is positive pi over 2. And so you're just identifying that it shifted right pi over 2, but when you plug it into the equation, it's negative. So just to be sure what you know to plug in because it is in Sine. Okay, so I hope that helps out. So now we're going to write an equation for a function with a given characteristic. So we're not given a graph, we're just given some things to be able to write an equation for. We have a sine curve with a period of 4 pi and then an amplitude of a half, a right phase shift of pi, and then a vertical translation down 1 unit. So we are looking again at a sine curve. So let's say y equals a sine of bx minus c, and we'll put d at the end. So we're going to identify all of these things. So a, that's pretty fast, that's just a half. And then d, we know that's down 1 unit, that is going to be minus 1 at the end. So we have to figure out what b and c are. So remember, period equals 2 pi over b. Now the period is 4 pi, so I'm going to set it equal to 2 pi over b. 4 pi equals 2 pi over b. Then we solve for b. So 4 pi b equals 2 pi divided by 4 pi. Then we notice that b equals 1/2. Okay, so b equals 1/2. Then we notice that it's a right phase shift of pi. So remember that phase shift equals negative c over b. So we know that b is a half, so we're going to plug that in. So number 1, phase shift is pi. Pi equals, that's from here, and then negative c over our b, which is positive 1/2. So to simplify this is pi equals, so multiply by 2, right? Negative 2c. And then to solve for c, we divide by negative 2. So c equals negative pi over 2. So that's what we're going to plug in into our formula because it is asking to write an equation. And we're writing a sine curve. So y equals 1/2 sine, and then b, so parentheses 1/2 x minus pi over 2, and then minus 1. So that is the equation that it is looking for. So I want you to go ahead and try this example here, a cosine curve. So we're looking at cosine now with a period of 2 pi over 3, an amplitude of 2, a left phase shift of pi over 6, and a vertical translation up 4 units. See if you can try this out. So if you tried this out, this is what you should have gotten. So notice that the period is 2 pi 3, so I set that equal to 2 pi over b. I don't have to solve for it. You can see right away that b has to equal 3 in order for that to be equal. Then I do the phase shift. It's left shift of pi over 6. So it's going to be negative pi over 6. So negative pi over 6 equals negative c over b. Then you solve for c. c equals a positive pi over 2. Then I notice that the amplitude is 2, so a is 2, and then up 4 units, so d is 4. So it's y equals 2 cosine, parentheses, 3x plus pi over 2 plus 4. So remember, left phase shift, that means there should be positive in the inside, and it is.